Hey, welcome to Midas Letter Live. I've got a hot potato here. It's Bruce Linton, who's the CEO of Canopy Growth Corp, as well as Canopy Rivers, and you are on
co-chairman
the
of
board.
Martello.
That's right.
Yeah, I gave up that CEO job in December. You know, it was. I thought maybe 3 was too much.
So I just wanted to time management. Have
Yeah.
you ever done did you take a course how to handle being the CEO of 2 publicly traded companies, or how does that work?
No. So what happens is actually there are several benefits of getting older. And one of them is you start to recognize what you're good at and what you're bad at. And so I think both places allow me to have a lot of time to spend with the money in the markets and marketing because they have really great people running them. And everybody says that, but it's actually usually not true that the founder can go off and do a whole bunch of stuff and the place runs better when he's away. And so when you look inside of the team under Mark Zakulin and the crew that are running that, and Tim as CFO, and if you look at Sean, Peter, and Eddie and the guys over at Rivers, John and Aaron at Martello, I don't think it would improve if I was in the shop. It improves when I'm out of the shop, making sure people know they exist, working on transactions, negotiating deals, and making sure you're in deal flow globally. Because the prospects for every one of those businesses is not in Canada. They're outside the world and leveraging Canada. And so I think, if I'm off in the Netherlands for a meeting, it actually comes up for all 3 topics. You can see me turn up maybe in Brazil, and all 3 topics. And so it kind of gets good leverage on airplane travel.
All right. Well, super elite member. Or
Yeah,
man. That goes. Speaking of deal flow, the first legal cannabis export to the U.S., that press release came out. Can you sort of expand on that? And
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's been about 2.5 years. We began interacting with counterparties in the U.S., and we haven't yet announced who they are, but we will. To think about how do we actually do research so that if you were wishing to be a good federal government, you could actually have a stabilized supply of certain products for which you could actually seek outcomes, and then you can make your regulatory environment for the federal level perhaps use some of that. And in the course, we get new intellectual property because we're not in the business of handing off IP, we're in the business of co-generating it and commercializing it. And so 2.5 years or so of that, and we didn't put a press release out saying we have the right to export it. We might have put that out 6 months ago, a year ago. But you have to both have the right product, and then have the approval of Health Canada to it. And so that got through. I will say that if we just did that order and we said how much did we make, you would show a bunch of brackets and red outcomes, but I don't think you should look that way. You should look at it and say, how much relevance will this be 1, 3, and 5 years from now? And I think it'll be a big deal.
That seems complicated to me, and I'm wondering, the conversations you might have had, or people on your team, with the FDA or
DEA. Yeah.
DEA. Okay.
So I think we actually probably lost more on our first export to Germany, because you'll recall we were the very first company out of Canada, second in the world, to send to Germany. And last quarter it was 10% of our business.
Right.
But we had a whole team, including getting standards built just for Germany, and spent 1.5 years getting that set up. So you've got to look at complicated as an advantage and persistence as the only pattern of behavior that gets you where you want.
So the German deal obviously played well to making the U.S. one work.
Well, I just think it's a sort of a pattern. Do you meet the standards? Do you have any activities which are not legal? Do you have, meaning federally, do you have certification of your product in terms of GMP1, GMP2, GAP? So once you start checking all those items, I'd say the world's pretty receptive to a company like that, and I think you're seeing it in the context of where we go. Totally.
Let's see here. There's a supply agreement with Organigram I saw pop up.
Yeah. So we have stores, right? So across the country, in 4 provinces, we have quite a few stores, and the first ones that'll be opening for this new wave will be in Newfoundland. And so our intention with stores is to have a selection and let people come in and get great education, make informed decisions, and pick a variety of products because we think, it's going to be like a coin toss. I'm going to have some of that tweed stuff and something else. And so it's good to have it on the shelves, and Newfoundland will be the first place, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and we're still working through whatever it is that's going to go on in the province of Ontario. But I think that program actually is, it's a bit bigger than us. I suspect it's more about liquor than it is cannabis, and so it's going to be a bit of texture in how we get that done. But we think as, we have 4 LP licenses in the province. We have 9 in the country. And so there's a question about who gets what where, and If it was always laid out crisp and easy, I suspect there would be no companies that started in Canada. It would have just been big guys come in. And so it's not new to our world.
Right. Well, speaking of stores, I was just mentioning to you off camera about walking around Toronto and noticing High and a little bit of a presence as I walk to work and so on.
I think we've locked up, after a couple of years of analysis and with Tokyo Smoke Haiku and us, I think we've locked up most of the very best locations. Now the question is, who gets them, under what terms, how do we work through that? But we have a pretty good negotiating position in that great locations. We've traded about 650 retail staff across the country who don't necessarily work even for us on our certified self-paced training, so they're actually knowledgeable cannabis vendors. We have a pretty good comprehensive winning record of applying for licenses, right? Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Newfoundland. There's kind of one company that came out in all those pretty well, which was us. And so we think we can probably work with whoever wants to win in Ontario. And the question is going to be who, what terms, which locations, how many locations. And that's kind of, you want to make sure you have an advantage. And I think we have a bunch to negotiate from our side.
Yeah. Well, we're getting super close to the 17th. I just wanted to know, maybe just first, what it means to you. It's been kind of a long time coming.
Yeah, for me, it means, there are a lot of people who persisted way before we had the opportunity. There were a lot of people who were impatient and maybe got prison time. There were a lot of doctors who took a risk and wrote early scripts, and there were lawyers who did pro bono work. And so I think the 17th is a lot more about what led to the change than it is about a company in the context of this wave. Obviously for us it's a huge thing, but you don't want to be selfish in your perspective. You should really recognize this didn't happen because of us. We were a contributor, but there's a lot before us. So we've tried to make sure everybody in our company looks at a bit longer view and looks back to sort of 2001 and events before that.
Well, beyond the 17th, looking at Canopy as sort of the recognized leader of the industry, at least that's how most people view it.
I think it's a correct view.
Yeah.
It's not incorrect.
No, I mean, Tilray had a 2 minutes of maybe a higher market cap.
Well, but that was a very interesting thing, right? Market cap is one thing, but you should also look at tangible assets. And I like Brendan and how they run the place. For the most part, I think they're pretty well behaved. But if you have no shares in your float and you have tension on people wanting to buy it, I think we've observed what happens. Like a few million or a couple million shares trading in total float that turns into an 8 or 10 million share trade volume per day means it's a pretty fast game of hot potato. I'm not sure what kind of regulators were overviewing this and why they didn't start with a mandatory larger and sustainable float, or why they're not insisting upon lockups being taken off and the normal course trade pattern. Because I find banks don't price things at $17 or $17.50 because they think they're worth $300. They price them at $17.50 because they think it's worth $19. And they want their clients to make some money, but not all the money. And so I don't think when they priced it they were wrong. It's just the torque that happens when you don't have any volume.
Speaking of banks and the 17th, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about potential shareholders and values moving forward.
Yeah.
Will institutions that are maybe conservative have an easier time investing into the space? What could you just say to somebody who might be thinking about investing and they're looking at Canopy and they're thinking, well, can I get value if I jump in now? Yeah,
so I'd say the world's just beginning to look. You'll notice in our shareholder base it's crept up to the mid-low 20s in terms of percentage of ownership by institutions, and that's happened after the last couple of months.
Right.
And if you think Canada is the only market in the world and the only thing that's ever going to happen on this topic, you will not make any gain. But if you think Canada is Exhibit A and the companies which are the most efficient in that market, create intellectual property in that market, create credibility in that market with balance sheets that can actually execute, then there are a lot more people that are going to be governed by medical cannabis over the next 1 or 2 years than exist in Canada by a multiple of 10 or 20. And so I really think the global investors are now looking at this and saying, is this global? Is this the best platform? Is this the best company? And maybe that's why we've seen our institutional shareholders go up.
Right. Okay. So, you know, moving forward, we've asked you this before. I guess 2019, it's execution, sales.
Well, Canada, it's just execute.
Yeah.
Make sure you roll out the new products. Make sure the retail works in all the places you have it. Make sure in the places that it's run by others that that we have the right set of products and the right sales team. But the rest of the world is, it's execute, because there's a window of credibility in which you can leverage their concerns as a regulator environment into wanting the security of the best company. And so what you want to do is show up and bring that expertise, retract the regulators into Canada so they can see how Canada see Canopy. And it's remarkable when you go to see an operation in Jamaica, it's not a lot different in the SOPs and controls than it is in Canada. And when you look at what we have to do in other European jurisdictions, very similar. And so that should give us a big advantage, and now we just have to get in there and do it.
So, and just finally, like I've heard you say before that, your part of your philosophy is that you just go, you don't wait, right? So being decisive, I think, is probably, would you credit that to, being at the level of success that Canopy's gotten to?
To an extent, right? Like you can see what's going to happen, and then you have to make it happen. Right? There's a combination of the counterparty being receptive but not moving at the pace you might want, and then going in and working and making it happen. So, I think you're seeing those efforts. People would have said what a crazy thing to spend all that time and money to get Germany turned up, where we spent a year or two working through our place, being all the standards necessary, not being the first export. But, then you look at the quarter and say, well, it was 10% or more. You have to do those things. So I would think that our approach has been figure out what's going to happen and then make it happen sooner and better. And we don't look for 100% information to make a decision. 51% decision making is actually a very good model. Now you might have to make a lot of decisions, because if you have 51% of the necessary information and you make a decision, it might be wrong sometimes. But then you know more, maybe you're at 57% then, and you make another decision. And so I think you can't be uncomfortable being wrong. For sure, Canopy has made more wrong decisions than likely anyone in the sector combined, or everyone. But you need to make decisions. Right. Indecision is an outcome that you don't like. And so we're pretty active on working through things and try it, go. Doesn't work, do it again.
Awesome. Well, I hope you make the decision to come back soon, because we love having you here.
Hey, man. Every time you guys call, I come. There's no Skype. There's show up.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.